Hello and welcome, Connected Yoga Teachers. I'm super excited that Yoga Alliance, Dani and Shannon are here today. And if you're watching the replay, give a little shout out in the comments for us. Tell us how you're doing today. Tell us if you have any questions for Yoga Alliance. And I want to give a big shout out to Offering Tree, who has made our live show possible today. Offering Tree is an amazing company. They're pretty new to the scene, but they also are doing a lot for our yoga teachers. So I just learned that they're starting to put together Zoom integration. I know a lot of you have been asking about that. They also just released a membership platform. So our yoga teachers have been also asking about that. And they provide an easy way to create a website and do scheduling. So it's a company to definitely pay attention to and watch. Welcome, Shannon and Dani. It's great to have you here today.
Shannon, thank you so much for having us. It is so nice to see you, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with all of your Connected Yoga teachers. I'm sure Dani is too.
Very excited to be here and excited to hear what kind of questions the community has. Thank you for having us.
Okay, so the first question I have is, what is happening with our yoga teacher trainings and the extension of how we can offer yoga teacher trainings? Can you clarify all of that for us?
I think we can. We'll do our best, of course. And mostly I will hand this to Dani because she's our real expert here. But before I do that, I wanted to just again say thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. And also, just if I can offer a verbal hug to you and to anybody listening, this is a heck of a year. And I know it's different for everyone going through it. And so I just hope everybody that's listening live or later is holding up okay and feels that, we're thinking of everybody all day, every day, and also has the support that you all need in your own lives to kind of make it through. This is tough. So Shannon, I hope you're doing well.
Thank you. I'm up in Canada and we're getting ready for winter up here, but we're still hearing a lot of your election stuff there. I know that our yoga teachers we're kind of like we're feeling there with all of you Americans. That's definitely for sure around the world, I think, and definitely as your neighbors here in Canada. And I just love that you called this out for our yoga teachers because it is a really challenging time for our yoga teachers. So thank you for starting us off with that. I'd love to know in the chat for those who are here live, how's the sound? And also tell us, where are you tuning in from? And do you have some questions for Dani and Shannon of Yoga Alliance today? We'd love to see your live questions. So let's get into what's the rule now if we have a yoga teacher training, because we can offer it online now for a 200-hour yoga teacher training, or maybe there are other options, all yoga teacher trainings right now. How does that work?
So Dani, I'll give a little bit of context, and then if you can actually answer Shannon's question, that would be great. I just backing up a little bit to kind of when we first started thinking about what we Yoga Alliance can and should do in this moment to support not only our members, but the community at large. I think and I hope this comes through. If it doesn't, I hope folks will let us know. Our priority, of course, is as it always is, in making sure that our members in the community have the tools and resources and support that they need to be able to do their important work, right? We're always sort of thinking about what can we do so that you can only focus on yoga teaching, and only there being the important word, not not meant to minimize. So that's kind of our frame in general. And in this moment, sort of right off the bat, we actually, I think some folks may know that we issued our recommendation and our sort of guidelines to ask folks to think about no longer providing in-person instruction, actually here in the US, ahead of the CDC. And that was because for us, recognizing the space we work in and that it is really about not just wellness in a kind of colloquial sense, but really sort of whole person well-being, that we had to prioritize health, physical health, both of our teachers and of their communities and their extended communities, right? Their direct communities and their extended communities. So that's kind of what's driving this particular set of announcements, updates, et cetera. The other things that we also wanted to make sure that we kept central and will continue to keep central are understanding the role that our standards and our credential play in teachers and schools' ability to do their work and making sure that we preserve that. And also making sure that you all have the time that you need to do the work that you do. And we know it takes time. I'll leave it to Dani to sort of talk through the details and the specifics, and she might have more she wants to add to that. But I just wanted to kind of give you the sense of like how we're thinking about all this, because it's a lot.
Okay. And before we move on to that, Shannon, I just thought of something that I forgot. If you want to tell also our listeners of like, what is your role with
Oh my
Yoga
gosh, of
Alliance?
course. I'm so sorry. So my name is Shannon Roche. I'm the president and CEO of Yoga Alliance and the Yoga Alliance Foundation. Yoga Alliance is a professional member association for teachers and schools in yoga, and the foundation is our associated charitable arm that works and both together work to really make sure that my colloquial description is sort of more yoga is more accessible and is also high quality and safe and equitable in the places where it is. So
thank you for that. Dani, thanks also for jumping in here today. Krista couldn't be here and that was the plan. And do you want to tell us like, what's your role at Yoga Alliance? And then what do we need to know now in terms of some of the updates?
Sure. So I'm Dani Hayes. I'm the Director of Member Relations. So I have the pleasure to work with members. I work with our member support team internally, credentialing team, as well as our accountability team. So a lot going on there. But I would like to kind of jump into some of the participation requirements and how we got there as well. I do want to call out that the online exemption is for schools that have already been approved with Yoga Alliance for an RYS credential. So this is not meant for teacher training programs that are already in the online space. It's really to support those schools that we have that are already teaching our standards, our ethical commitment, to keep consistently and also keep our integrity of our standards. So that's.
Can I just ask you a question about that? Does that mean then that a school now that didn't have their program in and connected with Yoga Alliance can't apply? Is that right?
They can still apply. So if you had a school right now, say if you had planned to open a school this summer, you may still want to do that. And you would have to go through our credentialing process with our up-leveled standards. However, being that we're in this new space now, you could also apply once approved for this online exemption. Being that a lot of schools don't know when and if they're going to be able to open. So we want to be able to support that moving forward. So through 2021, we will be opening, as of yesterday, the application to apply for the online exemption.
Okay, so the application went up yesterday, and that goes until the end of 2021. And did I read on there that there's you need to apply by this date?
No, so it is through September of next year. And if someone decides right now, for example, if they're beginning to open their studio again, and then they go back into a shutdown and say, for example, March, they could apply for this exemption and still be part of the program. So there is flexibility there to work with schools of where they're at. And that was done intentionally.
Okay. Do you think then it's wise for a school, knowing that we don't really know what's going to happen, is it quick to apply? Should we all as schools think about applying for that if we already have a school through Yoga Alliance?
I would say that the process is pretty easy. We didn't want to complicate things. There's enough going on to complicate the world that we're living in as it is. So the actual process is pretty easy in terms of it's really more about the school considering how they're going to offer the program. So one of the biggest requirements is to have a blend of synchronous and asynchronous learning. And so that's really the thought process that I think the schools are going to spend more time on, of what kind of blend do I want to offer, what works for me and my students of where I'm at right now. So we're not necessarily enforcing like a number per category. It's more about the training outcomes of what happens when you go through this synchronous and asynchronous learning practice.
Okay. And someone's just asking, just to clarify, so we apply as a new, say we didn't have a school with Yoga Alliance yet, we apply as a new school, then once we're approved, then we apply for that online teaching exemption.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. Thanks for that question and that clarification, Alod Park. That's someone who's watching from YouTube. So there was an announcement that came out yesterday. Was that the announcement? Were there other things to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's the major announcement specific to RYSs. There are some questions still for RYTs of what does this mean for me, in terms of a lot of teachers are moving their teachings online versus going back into the studio. You'll see, I believe that at the bottom of that email, there was a link that said learn more if you're an RYT. And the biggest news there is that we are going to allow you to continue doing your teaching hours online through 2021. So that's both continuing education and teaching hours. So teachers aren't stressed out about having to go into a studio to collect their teaching hours for continuing education.
Oh, that's a great clarification because someone was asking about in-person teaching hours. Also, our CE credits, then we can do those all online as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we actually, this past summer, we launched a whole digital event series through yourya.org that's really helpful if you're looking for CE. I do want to highlight, if you're new to online teaching, I'm actually one of those people. I used to teach in a studio, so this is a new territory for me. But there's a whole series of how to teach yoga anatomy online, to different tech practices of how do you log into Zoom or use Google Hangouts. So if you do need more information about best practices for online learning and how to get there, I highly recommend you visit yourya.org to look at some of those digital events that we have offer.
Okay, that's great if people are looking for that. I had another question about our continuing education. Like, can we watch something else and then submit it for those hours? Like, let's say, I mean, in my space, in my world, I might watch something that is put on by a physiotherapist, not a yoga teacher. Can I still submit that?
Yes, the folks that have other expertise for someone like you said, like someone that's an expert in anatomy, you can definitely use those for your CE hours. You just would want to write that name of who that was and what their expertise is. We do value that others, not just yoga teachers, but there are other experts in the field that can also support the work that we're doing. So that could be anything from anatomy professionals, philosophy, academics. Those are just a couple examples, but we do honor that type of CE credit as well.
Okay, that's great. Now, I want to ask a question that's been on my mind since we started doing the now online training counts. And I know this is a hard question for you because you don't have a crystal ball and you don't know how things are going to play out in the long run, but let's all imagine a world where we can all be back in person together, hugging and doing all of the yoga together that we want to be doing. Is Yoga Alliance planning on switching back to in-person? And let me just add to that, I know that right now I can't take online training to become a brain surgeon. I would still have to do that in person. And so there's a part of me that thinks, well, if we can do it online and it's valid, is it valid beyond this?
Mm-hmm. I love that question. Can you hear me? It sounds suddenly a little, okay, great. I'll start and Dani, chime in, please. So a couple of different things there. I think I heard you ask Shannon sort of, will we go back to, essentially, will this expire and will things return to quote unquote normal, right? Will we go back to what we had before? And then separately, sort of what's the right best set of choices to make given, assuming that people are in places where there are options, because not everybody is, but if you are, is there any, do we have any sort of thought or opinion on that? And, that may be a question for your audience as well. So I'll start with the first one. Gosh, you hit the nail on the head. No one has a crystal ball. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know what end means really or looks like. But I feel confident in a couple of sort of pieces that we do know. So for Yoga Alliance's purposes and for the credentials purposes, we've created this, or we've extended this exemption, that is a mouthful every time, through the end of 2021, so that people would have enough time to plan and market and share, the work that they plan to do, because we know that takes a lot of time. I also want to recognize that, assuming that for a lot of people, this experience, in whatever way they're experiencing it, started, on or about sort of Q1 2020, right, December to March. By the time we get to the end of 2021, we'll have been living in this sort of bizarre limbo state for 2 years. And that's a long time, right? We know from sort of the science and the research on sort of human habit forming that it doesn't take 2 years for people to change the way they work and live and be in the world. So I don't have a hard and fast answer, right, to your actual question. Will we go back? I don't know. What I feel comfortable saying is we're very cognizant that by December 2021, things that felt in March or now in October 2020 like they were temporary, or things we had to do because there was this extenuating circumstance or situation, probably won't feel that way anymore. And so what we're trying to do right now is figure out how can we, Yoga Alliance, and how can we use our tools to best reflect any changes that people will have had to make to their lives and their businesses and their teachings, while maintaining what's really important and central and core to the credentials, right? It is the integrity and the accountability and their ability to stand as markers of high quality and safe and equitable and accessible yoga. So, I think that's a long way of saying that's what's most important to us through this process. And if by the time we've sort of done our work and gotten through that time period, the community has become less platform less committed to one platform versus another, we'll do our best to meet them where they are. So if that means that everybody has sort of said, actually, you know what, this 60% of what we've always done in person can be done perfectly well online, and that's what we're hearing, then we'll try to meet folks where they are. If everybody's sort of saying, I never want to get on another Zoom call as long as I live, it's not fun and it's not effective or safe, we'll meet them there too. So I know that's not a particularly satisfying answer, but it is honest. I mean, this is still fluid.
Okay, well, that's really good to know that also it sounds like yoga teachers can definitely let their opinions be heard on this. Like what I'm hearing from yoga teachers is they're definitely missing their in-person stuff. And also, when we're looking at, okay, is this a valid training? Is this still meeting all of the criteria that we need? That's a valid question as well. If it does hit all of that criteria, then can we continue going? And I think us as yoga teachers as well, I'm seeing a lot of yoga teachers getting very creative in how they're making sure that, the information is landing and how they're, checking the boxes in their own yoga teacher trainings. I'd love to hear actually in the comments. I know we have some people here. I'm recognizing some names of some yoga schools that have a really great way of checking in. How are my yoga teacher trainees doing? Dani, do you have anything to add to that as well?
Yeah, I would just note that we're seeing some really innovative new ways of teaching, which has been really inspiring for us to look at. We want to continue to receive that feedback of what's working really well, and what are those things that you're like, I could actually do without this. So I would just continue to encourage to write us, let us know what you're thinking and what's working well, what's not working well, and to, experiment. We have these parameters of the synchronous and asynchronous learning. You have the curriculum that you've been approved for to use. So feel free to, color outside the lines a bit and figure out, do you want to add more mentorship? Is there something that you traditionally taught, in an in-person environment that now you might want to move to asynchronous? So now's a really good time to kind of play with that to see what's really working for you in your business model. And then also just kind of seeing where your reach is. One of the things we've heard is the access to trainings has become more available than ever. And that is a huge win. That's really important to us that folks have access to yoga all over the world. So we love hearing that. So continue to write us, let us know. And we're just so inspired. So thank you for sharing your input.
That's great. One Facebook user is saying like they've led online programs recently and 100% it was quote unquote valid. And there are those ways for connection and it was successful and really well received, but also, missing that hugging, learning face to face. And this is the time that we're in right now. We're all in it together. Here's one thing that I hadn't thought of. Now, there are two people that I see here live that I know help a lot of yoga teachers through yoga teacher training. Claire and Aruna have been on the podcast talking about how they've licensed their yoga teacher training and they help others to offer it. And so maybe these are some of the questions, like, I'm pretty sure this is Claire. There was some frustration in the community about the amount of free continuing education credits that Yoga Alliance was offering. Like, I can see this being an issue, but then because it might be pulling away from some of our continuing education providers, like maybe how do we give that feedback to Yoga Alliance? Because I feel like there's such a spot for collaboration. Like, it's like we could hook, obviously those people have their continuing education credits listed with Yoga Alliance. So how do we voice this and give those ideas of like, let's do something different?
A couple of thoughts, and let me very specifically answer the how do we voice this question now, and I'd love to say it a few more times before we close too. So there's a few avenues. We have an email inbox that is not specific to any issue. You don't have to sort of email media at or standards at or feedback at. So any questions or comments or feedback or concerns, whatever, feel free to always send to info, INF as in Frank O, at yogaalliance.org, and we'll make sure it gets into the right hands. Same idea by phone is 888, or I should say +1 888-921-YOGA. That's 921-9642. We've also just launched an online community, and I will kick it to Dani in a minute to ask her to tell folks more about that, because she's also the mastermind of that, and it's awesome, I think, or I hope. But to the question about CE credits, I completely hear and understand that, and it is like a lot of things have been, from our perspective in this moment, a tension and a sort of question of trade-offs, right? So what we were trying to do and have continued to try to do with the CE credits that we've made available to folks is, again, sort of help people make this unexpected, sudden, in many cases, completely overwhelming transition to a new space, a new platform, while they're still trying to probably actually work even harder to make ends meet, right? Just trying to sort of help ease that shock to the system. That's not intended to be necessarily a permanent way of our working, right? Because we also recognize exactly what the folks just suggested, which is that it puts us in a little bit of a weird and sometimes unwelcome position. So I want to be careful that we aren't stepping on the toes of our members, of course, and also want to make sure that we're using the reach that we have to try to help people in the moment that we're in. And so the other thing that I would say there is, and I hope that you see this reflected in the work, and if you don't, please let us know. We've been really careful not to be teaching the classes ourselves unless they are classes or conversations about our work, right? We're staffed almost entirely by actually quite experienced yoga teachers, but we haven't put our staff forward for those, for CE credits in that space for exactly that reason. We've wanted to lift up other voices and give our members opportunities. So if you are in that work, you can also reach out and let us know if that's something you're interested in. All the same contact information, but very much recognize the concern, and we're trying to figure out how best to handle it and welcome suggestions. And Dani, I don't know if there's anything you want to say on any of that or the community.
No, not necessarily to CE, but I do want to mention that we did just launch our community platform. And I don't know, Shannon, if you've heard of this yet, but we just came out in the past week. But just what it does is it does allow it's a social network for yoga teachers to share resources, to share ideas, host conversations, and it's all networking. And so what we've seen in the past week is a lot of conversation about best practices for opening a studio or moving into the online space, how to market your business. So anything from that to more advanced type study of philosophy content, business templates. The information that members are sharing with each other is incredible. So if you haven't dove into that yet, I would highly recommend visiting it and taking a peek. And it is open to all members. So that's an international platform. So you'll see, you speak a different language, you'll be able to access and use the platform as well.
Okay, that's great. I was really curious about what that was. So it's good to hear about this. And this is another place to have our voice heard. I think that's something for our yoga teachers to recognize here, that it's like we pay Yoga Alliance as members. So it's like we get a say in that. And like you said, we submit the emails or we can call Yoga Alliance. One other person has a great question here. I'm pretty sure I'm bumping back and forth here because it doesn't always show me your names, but I think it's Alina, who is based out of London, Ontario. And in summary, so I'm going to remove this because it's blocking Shannon here on my view anyway. But in summary, like, how do we know that these yoga schools are actually meeting the standards? And this was there before. This is not a new thing because it's online. I actually wonder if it's easier now that it's all online, because Yoga Alliance could kind of pop in and be at a class at any time or be at a training at any time. And I know that you did this huge standards review and you reached out to all of the members and asked for feedback, and I believe reached out beyond our members. So what's happening behind the scenes there, or what can we expect with the standards?
Dani, you want to take that to start, and I can jump in if need be?
Yeah, sure. And I would agree that that's always been a question of, like, how do you know? There's a lot of different ways that we hear feedback. One is through surveying, through social credentialing. And another way is honestly conversations. Our members will call or email. A lot of trainees will share our experiences. And so it's interesting there's a lot of different ways in which we receive feedback, but with the accountability practices of this is online's really the same way. At the end of the day, we're looking at outcomes, competency testing specifically. And that is something new with our standards, is we've moved from more topic category based to outcome competency based. And that goes along with online exemption as well. And so one of the things that, if you are applying for this online exemption, is that there will be surveying. We are asking to survey the lead trainers for their experience, the trainees of their experience, as well as, asking for some benchmarks of how is the testing going, what are the different ways that you're competency testing, being at a recorded practicum video, or, a standard written test. So we are looking at those different benchmarks so we can make sure that there are accountability processes and that we're also upholding the integrity of our standards.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. If people have suggestions of how that could happen, like, share it in the chat right now. That's
Absolutely.
a great place to say, here's my idea. Thank you again, Claire. Claire's just saying that Yoga Alliance does a great job of returning the emails and phone calls. And it's true. Like, it's great to see that our members can deliver the content. And she throws in the word govern, which I find it's like I do feel sometimes for Yoga Alliance. When I think of Yoga Alliance, I think, because I am a Yoga Alliance school, I have a Yoga Alliance certified school, prenatal yoga school. And I think, you take my money and then you tell me what to do. It's kind of like paying taxes. And these are the times that I want to highlight also some of the work that Yoga Alliance is doing, and it's not always being seen. because last week I heard something about New Hampshire as a state and something happening to the yoga teachers there. Do one of you want to talk about that?
Sure, I'm happy to. And thank you, Shannon, and thanks for the question too. I mean, and it is a tricky position to be in. It's the job we've chosen to take on. So that's we don't shy away from that. But you're right, we're not a governing body, but we are hoping to provide credentials that serve as a point of reference, right? And really can be that our members can use as a point of sort of public, like a public marker of what they know, what the students can expect from their teaching. And again, the original credential was designed as a minimum set of standards. And so, we're very cognizant of sort of the role we play and try very hard to stay in the space that the community wants us to, and stay out of the spaces that they don't want us to be in. One of the spaces that I do think, to your point about paying taxes, I think is easier to affect and more effective to be in as a collective, really, which is what you're doing when you're joining the membership, which is sort of participating in us to be able to be a voice of the community externally, is the advocacy work that we do, which is what is happening in New Hampshire. So we had heard from a couple of members, one in particular, and then a few to follow, that they had been contacted by the New Hampshire State, I believe it's the Board of Education is the technical term, but essentially the regulatory body of licensed professions, and that the state of New Hampshire was saying that teacher trainings needed to be licensed as secondary educational providers, so sort of like postgraduate education. A group of us spent a lot of time on the phone with the folks at the Board of Education who are heading that effort last week. We're in an ongoing series of conversations with them. The long and short of it is they are, what they were saying to the members that we heard from is that they had recently become aware of yoga schools as a group of businesses that would rightly be sort of caught under the statute that regulates, existing statute that regulates businesses that provide secondary education. And so they had started to reach out to yoga schools to say, we're here, you should be licensed, come work with us. We made quite an extensive case to suggest that perhaps a global pandemic was not the time to have that conversation with small businesses. They were really receptive and really supportive, actually, and also felt that, that's not really their position to decide or not decide. They referred us to the New Hampshire State Legislature because this regulation came from the legislature. So we're right now trying to figure out how best to connect with the New Hampshire State Legislature so we can make our case to them and say, we don't think this is what you mean to be doing. In the meantime, their position is, unless and until we hear from the legislature that something has changed, that is what they have told us to do. The one thing I want to flag for members in New Hampshire who might be listening or watching is that they did make us aware that they have waived licensure fees, or all of the application fees for any businesses that fall under this statute until I believe it's June of next year. So we're in the process of working with them and with the state of New Hampshire and the legislative body to make sure that actually yoga schools are exempted, and that work will be ongoing and we'll keep everybody apprised of that. But I also wanted to let everybody in New Hampshire know that there's this window of time when the fairly significant fees, if they're going to apply, are waived, because I wouldn't want you to miss that too. So that's the short version. I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's good. And this is something that we don't always see, but that someone was saying, like, thank you from the New Hampshire community. And I think just clarifying it's the Department of Education Career School. And then also another Facebook user said we had to deal with this in Canada. In our province, we needed to register as continuing education programs, so many hoops to jump through. And so this is something where if you bump into something like that, I would say reach out to Yoga Alliance. And the interesting thing about this is it probably serves all yoga teachers, not just Yoga Alliance members, which is great as well.
Absolutely. Both counts.
Yes. I wanted to add to this I wanted to ask another question, and maybe some of our people here live have other questions to post as well. Earlier, yoga teachers were sending me questions like, what's happening now with the 300-hour, the prenatal, and the children's? Like, where is that sitting?
Again, Dani is really the expert, but I'll give you the very short answer from my perspective, which is that the board had actually completed our work, its work. We were teeing up ourselves to be ready to make the announcements for those programs that were sort of the parallel announcements to the 200 that we'd made the year prior, just as COVID hit. And so we have that work completed. We've put it on hold for now because that feels to us like a lot to put on businesses and teachers and leaders that are probably already pretty maxed out. And we also want to make sure that the work that we had done, this time last year continues to be relevant when we get to that point. But that's just the very short answer. Dani, I don't know if there's specifics you want to share.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just think it's the up-leveling standards process. It's really important to us in terms of curriculum changes that some schools may need to address. But I think, as we talked about earlier, we don't know what it's going to look like in a year from now. And so by delivering the new standards in a landscape that's really evolving right now, we want to evolve with it. We're meeting our community where they're at. And right now there's so much shift that it's really hard to know that. So we're trying to just be really responsible with that and how we're addressing it with the community. So we're just taking a pause and seeing what happens and evolves in the next couple months.
Okay, that's good to know. Also, I just want to give a huge shout out. When COVID hit, I feel like Yoga Alliance was so quick to get some resources up on the website right away. I had someone just commenting the other day in a podcast interview. I forget who it was, saying like, wow, that was super helpful. Of like, here are some things to think about with your props and all of those things. Now, this is a question that I feel like Yoga Alliance can really help with. And I want to explain a piece of this. So we get questions all the time in our Connected Yoga Teacher group about what do I legally have to know? And what about insurance? And I've had insurance companies, not from Canada, reach out to me from the US and say, like, will you be an affiliate with us? And I think, no, like, I will not. Like, sure, if I'm using some type of yoga prop and I love it, great. When it comes to like legal stuff and insurance, I will not create a partnership with that. Like, I want yoga teachers to have a non-biased view of their options. And our yoga teachers, I've heard from some this month who are afraid to be teaching online or afraid to be teaching in a studio with COVID right now because of legal and insurance. So can Yoga Alliance, do you already have that created? Would you consider like really focusing on that to help us in that right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that the resources were helpful. And if there's anything that anybody needs, wants, thinks we could add or do differently, please, please, please let us know. That is an ongoing effort. We're on it all day, every day, and really just want to make sure that people have whatever tools and templates and resources and research and anything that we can take off their plates. Dani, do you want to talk a little bit about what we do have? And I can, if there's anything else, I can jump in.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question, and one that we have received a lot of inquiry about. So we have created these online resource bundles that really speak to everything online learning. And one of the things that we do have, they're sample releases and liability waivers for teachers and schools in the online space. And we also, there was a whole, I made some notes about this, thinking it might come up, insurance and online instruction FAQs. So those are anything with insurance and in retrospect to online instruction. All of that can be found at yourya.org. But there are those resource bundles. So if you do have those questions or if you need some support, just contact us and we can guide you in the right direction.
Okay, that would be great, because here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, insurance companies, like I said, reaching out to people like me, and I'm sure to other people who yoga teachers are listening to. And I feel like that there's something that doesn't sit right with me in that. And also, there's legal information happening from different sources, but I feel like if Yoga Alliance asked, a lawyer those questions and got all of the answers for like this, as many answers as you can get, then yoga teachers aren't needing to pay, individual lawyers all over the place or something. I don't know if that's possible, but that's what I would like to see come out of it.
Well, and we, just so folks know, if they don't know already, we do also, some of that is in the bundles. And again, Dani, if you want to share any more details, feel free. And also one of the member benefits that we've had for some time, and actually I think has gotten quite a bit of use this year, is a partnership with an attorney who has extensive experience working with yoga schools and studios and teachers. So that is also available. And I mentioned both because there is some work that we can do that is, whether it's entirely universal or whether it's, pretty extensively applicable, I think is probably a better description. But there are laws and regulations that are hyper local, right? So I also want to make sure, as much as we can take off some of that work and minimize costs to a certain extent, I also want to make sure that people are cognizant of anything that's unique to their localities. And that may be where our member benefit and the attorney there can be helpful.
That's so good to know. And someone saying here, like, touch base with your insurance company. I always recommend that. Like, I just think that if we had a core resource like insurance, legal considerations, which it sounds like you already have. So I don't know if you have that link, if you want to send it to me in our private chat, and then I can make a banner, Dani, for it. And this is what I'm generally hearing, like, make sure that you're covered to teach online. I know a lot of insurance companies before this happened were not even wanting people to do a demo video or have photos online. So a clarification question around the 300 hour. So does that mean that people can still just submit their 300 hour or their prenatal or children's in the same way?
So just to make sure I understand the question, being that, so the 200 hour is the only credential that we release the new standards for. So if you are a school that's already teaching your 300 hour, 500 hour children's or prenatal, you would still teach your Yoga Alliance approved curriculum with the online exemption. So that curriculum would not change. We're not holding you up to those new standards for the 3 and the 5 because we haven't released them yet. So that's just I think I answered that question. I want to make sure that was the question being asked.
Yeah, Claire, let me know if that answered it or if there was more there. I'm just guessing it's Claire.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add to that too, and Dani may be kicking me under the proverbial virtual table here, but I know that we appear often, I think, as a bit of a sort of nameless, faceless monolith. In fact, there's, about 50 folks in used to be our office, but on our team Zoom calls these days who really genuinely are entirely dedicated to supporting our members. And so in situations like that, if you're sort of feeling like you're stuck in limbo or kind of in between, the present and the future, give us a call. And to the extent, we're not going to go so far as to say this is what's going to be announced 3 months from now, because, one, that wouldn't be fair. And two, to Dani's point, there may be changes that we need to make. And so we don't want to direct you in the wrong direction either. But, if you're working with specific challenges, we can always have a conversation about what those are and whether there's anything that we know or can do that would be helpful.
That's great. I'm just getting this is maybe too large for but you'll go through, so they look under portals. Is that what they look for?
So under the main navigation on the Yoga Alliance website, you will see new RYS standards. And once you see that tab, the very last one is the 2021 RYS online exemption. On that page, you will see FAQs, the resource bundles. The resource bundles include any type of professional templates, things like that, from there to digital events that talk about how to put your teaching online. So there's a huge variety of information there. But if there's something that you don't see there that you want, please call and email us, and we'll see what we can do to get it added. Anytime someone calls and emails with our member support team, we have what we call these think tanks in our organization, where we come together and we actually brainstorm, troubleshoot some of the things that we're hearing from members. So please know your ideas do not fall on deaf ears. We use that. We take them to the think tanks. We troubleshoot and figure out what we can do to make things happen. So please, let us know if there is something there that you'd like to see in the future.
That's great to know.
And I think, Shannon, I think you were also referencing the attorneys and the insurance and those sort of discounts too. So the link that Dani shared is the right one to go direct to for these, sort of COVID specific resources. There's also lots of other membership benefits that are available in a place that's a little easier to find. So if you're, on our main page, it's just yogalliance.org. There's a banner at the top. One of the navigation tabs there is membership benefits. So you can poke around there and you'll see discounts and advocacy and all that stuff.
So I've had a few companies reach out to me lately and say, like, how do I connect with Yoga Alliance? Is that something that you want more applications from companies, like with discounts for our members? Yeah? Okay. I'm just going to send them all your way.
Always.
And if yoga teachers, you're working with a company, that means like tell that company, hey, if you want to get in front of more yoga teachers, here's a great way. And don't forget to add a discount for us. That's good.
100%. And can I add a pitch to that too?
Yeah.
So yes. And I know that a lot of our membership benefits have historically been focused on sort of the tools and props and clothes and resources that folks need in person, right? And so one of the things that we're working through right now is figuring out how to flesh that out and build it out more to serve people's needs in this new space. And so to your point, Shannon, if anyone listening or watching has had good experiences with any companies that have helped you sort of make that leap or fill those gaps, please let us know. Because one, we'd love the point of contact and the warm introduction. And two, we'd much rather share resources that our members and that the community have found useful than just those that we think, seem to fit the bill.
Okay, that's a great clarification. Also about the 300-hour, just bouncing back to that for a second. So some teachers have been waiting for the new standards to write out their 300 hours. So any tips for them?
Dani, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would contact us and we can see where your curriculum is now and like where your 300-hour was at in the kind of old standard space and give some direction of where we're going, with just, again, the caveat that some of that might change. So I would just be cognizant of that when making those curriculum decisions. I know there's a lot that goes into building curriculum, working in credentialing, from manuals to marketing materials. So that's kind of the reason why we're holding back a little bit, but we're also really happy to be transparent of where we would like to go, which, I think the overall arch and everything we're doing right now are benchmarks, competency assessment to make sure that we have safe, quality yoga teachers. But give us a call if you do have some specific questions about that, and we're happy to share.
That's Claire. She clarified that it is her. I lean on Claire and Aruna a lot when it's like, what are your questions for Yoga Alliance? Because I know they're looking at things a lot in terms of being a yoga school. I want to ask now, what trends are you seeing? What are you seeing with the numbers? I feel like I don't have numbers in front of me. I talk to a lot of yoga teachers in a lot of studios. I hear about places closing down right now with COVID. I hear some people are like, my business is thriving, or, oh my gosh, I hardly have anyone showing up on my Zoom sessions. What's happening? Is there anything that you can share with us of what you're seeing right now?
Sure. And again, Dani, jump in here. I'll sort of try to paint the picture broadly, and I know that, in the specifics, it's always a little bit different. I'm getting all the same emails that I imagine everybody here is from my local yoga community, right? I'm getting the emails that say, please contribute to this GoFundMe or we will have to close, or, this studio that I've practiced at for forever, is moving entirely online, or whatever the case might be. And, so I think, so let me come back to that. specifically, we have not launched a member survey in this moment yet, because again, we've really been trying to sort of offer resources, not ask things of people. Although we are feeling sort of the pinch and the need to really have specific data. So I do think that's going to be something we'll be doing in the relatively short future. So that is a long way of saying I don't have specific numbers to say, like, we used to be here and now we're here. Anecdotally, I think what we're starting to see is sort of two sides of the same coin. There are brick and mortar locations that, I can certainly confirm, just again from my own inbox, are closing. And I'm not surprised by that. Rents are expensive. We've been out of spaces for a very long time, and it's hard to sort of hold on to those when we thought this might be a couple of weeks. We thought it might be a couple of months. And here we are, in DC, we're on month 8, and sort of going into a winter that looks more challenging than the last several months have been. And so I'm not surprised, although sort of heartbroken, to see some studios and some physical spaces closing. And on the other hand, that has nothing to say and no impact on the teacher, right? So the teachers are, as you all know as well as or better than I do, the yoga teachers stand, right? They continue to they continue to teach, they continue to share. There's nothing about a physical space closing that changes what that person knows and what they have to offer and what they give to the world. And so, what we're seeing in our trends is we're starting to see a reflection of what is probably physical spaces starting to close and teachers continuing to teach, which I find a lot of comfort in. And so we're also sort of starting to think in that direction of, what can we do to help teachers who maybe have spent most of their lives and careers kind of working in a particular setting or a particular physical space, and who are making transitions there too. Dani, I don't know if there's anything in addition to add or...
No, I think that was beautifully said. I mean, it's really just, we've seen a lot of interest in the online space, which it's an interesting piece for us because it's not necessarily the change, it's the transition piece that's the tough part of like actually being in it and learning how to teach online. And I need to learn how to do this platform and all of that. So you have more evergreen content, which is, again, different for a lot of schools. So, I would just add that we have a lot of interest and we're just doing the best, that we can do in terms of resources, having conversations, and doing just a lot of forward thinking of where we need to go to meet the online space. But yeah, I think that's all really I have to add there.
That's good to know. Keep us posted if you do find out some numbers. Like, the one thing is, I have seen an incredible amount of creativity from our yoga teachers. Like, they are really figuring things out. We did a live interview with Dominique this week, who said through many tears and a lot of help from her tech savvy husband has figured out how to stream her class and do this hybrid and get it online. Like, we didn't sign up for this as yoga teachers.
In fact, probably the opposite, right?
Yeah, we were like, get me away from computers. Yes. So you're not alone in this, yoga teachers, if you're listening to this. And, also see, do I need a break right now? Or do I need to dig in and learn something new? And just know that none of us have it all figured out. Like, we're all trying to figure it out along with you.
And Shannon, I also, if folks have creative sort of solutions that have worked for them, and if they're willing to share, I don't want to assume, we'd love to hear those stories too, because we're also trying to source those ideas and sort of put them back out to folks so that other teachers in other places can try those tactics too. Like, I heard, I think our board chair told me about a yoga studio in her community that is organizing itself into the same kinds of pods that here in the US we're hearing about, parents doing for their students. So instead of having just a, open public class that's a drop-in period, right? This studio in particular decided to reorient to pods of 6 people who all agreed to certain, rules of engagement, essentially. And that teacher taught that way for a predetermined period of time. So there's all kinds of stuff like that happening, and we're trying to learn about as much of it as we can so that we can make as many people aware of those options as possible too. So would love to hear more.
Yeah. Yeah, I am seeing things like that as well, like you said, with the pods or online stuff, or yoga teachers are really doing an amazing job out there. Arun is saying, like, thank you so much. It's so nice to see live faces. So I don't know if that's going to be part of the community thing, but I think that really helps our yoga teachers. It's so hard right now to read text. We've seen in our Facebook group, when it's all like text, and no video of something, it's very different. I'll send a quick audio message to someone and they're like, oh, like, thanks for that. But I'm doing it so that we're still two people talking and not just texting each other. There are a couple other things here. One person had asked, is there a confidentiality agreement signed by Yoga Alliance regarding the up-leveling intellectual property submitted for review? That's a great question.
It is. Dana, that's all you.
Yeah, we certainly value intellectual property. One of the things that we do ask for from schools, we certainly do not share schools' information, but some schools do as part of their business practices in terms of they have an affiliation with each other, or they want to share curriculum. So we just as a note there that we do ask, if you are using someone else's curriculum, that will be something that we're going to ask you, and we want to make sure that you have the rights to be using that content before submitting it to us. So just make sure that if you are doing that you have some kind of business agreement with another school, so that's clear. But we certainly do not share any information regarding your curriculum.
Here's another one. When do current ERYT 200 teachers with registered yoga schools need to meet the enhanced standards by? Still February 2022? Oh, right. I totally forgot about this. Thank you, Claire, for asking this. 300 training hours plus 500 teaching hours after the year we have had is tough. Oh, I did not even think about this.
So it's actually an excellent question that we've been thinking and brainstorming about for the past year now. As of course, that initial announcement has evolved a little bit as well. Being that we're in this new space, we're not going to be requiring lead trainer up level by February 2022. We are going to push that date back. We don't have the exact timeline yet. We will announce that soon before the end of the year. But just know that I think we can all agree it's been a crazy year and we've had to pivot. So that February 2022 date is no longer applicable to the up level. So we'll give you more information about that very, very soon. We're tying up a couple of loose ends and we'll announce that by the end of the year.
That's great. Okay, here's another one. Is there a concern about classes being streamed without the teaching being able to see the students? This is a big thing that I'm hearing from teachers. I've taken many classes online since March and some are not giving safe cues. And when they can't see the students, it's concerning. I wonder if Yoga Alliance has thought about how that relates to the registered yoga teaching criteria for teaching online.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And we've heard a lot of feedback on that as well. What's interesting is they're in an asynchronous, more like on-demand type learning format where you're not seeing a student. We have seen outcomes that are very valuable in the asynchronous space. So we didn't want to disregard that type of learning style because it can be done very well. And we can see in especially higher education, how they're doing that and how it's really working well for students. So we're still in that, we're still in a discovery phase of figuring out what's working well, what's not working well, what are those benchmarks of competency testing that we're looking at that coincide with synchronous versus asynchronous learning. But so it is something that we're aware of. We want to continue to gather feedback and data to support where we're going to end up making a decision to go forward.
Yeah, and we're approaching this, I think, from a few angles that far better than I could have described, and also hopefully the continuing education that you've seen, and also more to come, right? So I think Dani, I think you said this really well earlier, that this is new for probably a good majority of the folks that are working in this space. So I want to recognize that too, right? It's kind of like the first few times anyone taught, right? In a lot of ways. And so there's learning to be done there. And also I think we're really trying to figure out what kinds of education about online teaching, do folks feel like they need, and do they feel like is helpful? So that's, there's some of that on the resources that we've made available, and lots more to come.
Okay, that's great. At the end of 2019, I did here's how you do a Zoom demo, and I spent a big chunk of the time talking about why you would want to teach on Zoom. Like that was a thing back then. I was like, sometimes I do this if there's a snowstorm or if someone lives far away, and I had to tell people, here's a great Zoom demo, but just skip like the why you might need that. It's all changed. And I think also yoga teachers, reach out to your companies that you're working with. Like I know Offering Tree is a company that is starting to do Zoom integration. Like Eddie, I'm going to hold you to it. He said in a couple of weeks, like the things that you're using, ask those companies, how can this make my life easier? As well as Yoga Alliance. Yoga Alliance is listening. That's the thing. You're paying and you pay them to hear you and help you. So there are a lot of people asking for help. And that's why sometimes it's like, oh gosh, why are you not just doing this thing? I wonder if anyone else has a question to fit in our last few minutes. Claire's saying that's like, thank you. And it might be Maureen from Yoga New Hampshire. It's been really helpful, and it's great to have these updates. I agree. It's just nice to check in with Yoga Alliance.
Well, I would just say to both of them and to the collective of folks watching and listening, thank you. This has been a fantastic conversation. We really appreciate your questions. And Shannon, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, we are here to listen and here to support, and we can't support well unless we know what's needed. And so, we're trying very hard to do our work to understand that, and absolutely always welcome any suggestions or feedback as well. But Maureen, to your point, Shannon, if you'll have us, this is wonderful. We're thrilled to be here. So thank you so much. And we're always happy to come back whenever it's useful. That's not to say bye. That's just a thanks.
That's so good. That's a good idea. Like every once in a while, we should have a little check-in and hit all of these questions, because I don't know. I mean, I try and keep up, and then I reach out to Claire and Aruna and say, tell me about this. And I reach out to Yoga Alliance. It's hard to keep up with it all. So I am going to put the banners up. Dani, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, other than thank you so much. Thank you for joining and listening, and really excited to hear more feedback and input as we evolve and grow as a community together. So thank you.
That's great. That is exactly what we're doing. We're evolving as a community together. This is when the yoga really happens. I have told myself that many times.
This is why we practice. Here we are. Absolutely true.
Yeah. And also our yoga students are really needing yoga right now, in whatever way we can get it to them. I saw that there was a study that came out that we have this like global pandemic stress that we're all going through, and we're seeing how stress is impacting people. And so it's really important that the teachers who feel like, okay, I can show up and serve are being supported. So thank you both for doing that today. Also, Claire's saying it's so great to have a community. We appreciate you, Shannon, for keeping us all connected. That's what I love doing. I absolutely live for doing that. So thank you to Shannon and Dani. Also a shout out to Dani, who was organizing all of the emails. And I said, like, this is just a great sign when we have two Shannons and two Danis that we're making today happen.
It definitely makes it easier too.
It does. It does. Okay. Thank you both for all of your time today.
Thanks for having us. This was fantastic, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here live, and you can keep posting questions in the comments, and we'll come back to them and help each other out.
Yeah.